understand who is classified as an English learner. English learners are students whose primary language is not English and who need additional support to build English proficiency. Stones emphasize that school counselors have an ethical duty to ensure equitable access to services and to advocate for students from diverse culture and linguistic backgrounds. By understanding who our EL students are, we can provide cultural response support, collaborate with teachers, and help create an environment where these students feel valued and able to succeed. Now that we understand who are the English learners, it is important to look at the barriers they often face in school settings. So the current challenges of English learners, some of the main challenges in school settings include language barriers, limited access to rigorous instruction, and feelings of cultural adjustment or isolation. Stone reminds us that school counselors are ethically responsible for identifying and reducing these barriers by advocating for equitable resources and fair treatment to all students. By understanding these challenges, we can better support English learners, students academically, socially, and emotionally while promoting a more inclusive school environment. To better understand our legal responsibilities, our next slide connects these challenges to important laws that protect English learners. The law versus Nichols established that schools must provide meaningful language support to students who are English learners, as failing to do so violates Title VI of the Civil Rights Act by denying equal access to education. Stone explains that ruling affirmed that equitable instruction requires schools to remove language barriers that hinder learning. The impact of this case continues to shape educational practice by improving access to instruction and supporting the academic success of English learners through legally required language services. Our next law was the Every Student Succeeds Act. And this straightens school accountability by requiring states to monitor, track, and report English learners' progress, while also mandating clear language development standards. Stone notes ESA's focus on data-driven oversight ensures schools actively support EL growth. These requirements promote structured language support programs and lead to more equitable learning opportunities for multilingual students. With the legal foundation established, the next slide also focus on the ethical standards, the ASHA that guide our daily counseling practice. This highlights keys of ASHA ethical standards that guide our work with English learners. Stone did explain counselors are required to advocate for equitable access, support students' cultural identities, and help build inclusive school environments. We are also responsible for using data, identify, and address achievement gaps. These standards remind us that promoting fairness and cultural responsive practices is a core part of our professional duty. These standards are then applied directly in how we support students day to day. So this slide shows how we apply our role as counselors when supporting English learners. Stone emphasizes that counselors must advocate for appropriate services, collaborate with teachers and families, and provide cultural responsive counseling. As counselors, we have an ethical responsibility to monitor students' academic and social emotional progress, ensuring EL students are supported holistically. So our textbook connections that I found were directly to key concepts of Stone's ethics and law. Stone reminds us that counselors are ethically responsible for ensuring equity and legally obligated to follow federal laws and protect English learners' rights to meaningful access and education. She also emphasizes our duty to advocate for marginalized students and ensure they receive fair and supported opportunities within the school system. In conclusion, supporting English learners is both an ethical and legal responsibility for school counselors. As Stone emphasizes, we must advocate for equitable access, honor students' cultural identities, and collaborate to remove barriers affecting achievement. By using data, providing cultural responsive support, and upholding ASCA ethical standards, we help ensure that EL students feel valued, included, and empowered to reach their full potential. And those are my references.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Excellent job. What is an example of a strategy that people use in the classrooms or a counselor can use in the classroom if they're doing class lessons or small group for the EL learners?
So in my personal, at school I work for, I do have quite a few English learners. I myself was an English learner as a child. English is my second language, so I do have a little accent to it. But what I do, I like to be able to translate for English students to understand what I'm telling the student that doesn't speak the language, as well me translate to the student that doesn't speak the language of what's going on, so that they feel involved and valued, and that their whatever their thought is or whatever their question is valuable, and I could explain it in both languages so they could understand.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Alejandro.
Let's see. Evening, everyone. Let me just get it set up. Okay. So, evening, everyone. My name is Alejandro. Today, I'll be speaking on part of the underserved students, particularly the foster care youth. The foster care students are students who are removed from their home environment, whether it was due to any kind of safety concerns or negligence, as well as any other suppose that parents or anything like that have been in a situation where there's substance abuse prevalent in the household. So in instances where the child's health is at stake or their well-being is at stake, foster care student or youth are youth who are removed from those environments and placed under the care of the court jurisdiction. So when we're talking about the foster care youth, some of the current statistics that are prevalent in our country today, or in particular in California today, is that even though there has been a reduction in the rates of foster care and or youth entering the foster care system, there are still the same issues within the foster care system that are affecting these youth. So for instance, based off of last year's data, graduation rates among the foster care youth are still at a relatively low percentage, even though it has gone up in recent times. The only consistent one that has been an issue for or a challenge for foster care youth is that a majority of them are still facing housing instabilities. And this is particularly for those students who are transitioning out of the foster care system. So while our state has implemented some strategies to kind of remedy that by prolonging how long they're able to stay in the system or the support that they receive after they exit the system, they still experience that same continued rate of struggles when it comes to finding jobs to help them sustain stable housing. The count currently in comparison to the years before, based off last year's data, is at 27,000. So again, there's a trend that the trends are going downward in the sense that all foster care youth are beginning to see an improvement in their overall well-being and quality of life, but the issue persists throughout the majority of foster care populations. A majority of the foster care youth do struggle from chronic absenteeism. And this can be a result of the rapid environments that they're in the sense that they're always changing in some instances that don't permit them to be as present as some of their other peers might be. So when we're talking about the current challenges of the foster care system, in the previous year, a lot of foster nonprofits have shut down, and this is primarily because of the insurance rates that have gone up as a result of the lawsuits that have befallen the government and other entities, in the sense that foster care in the systems were being abused, and as a result, they were granted the ability to finally file lawsuits against these entities. And as a result, it's kind of frightened a lot of the insurances. So a lot of those profits have shut down. So we might begin to see an increase in these kinds of issues that have been plaguing them in the past, and as well as a lack of support or structured support system for them to rely on the way that they have been able to previously. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of foster youth are struggling with homelessness when they are aging out of the foster care system. And as a result, because they're becoming homeless as a result of this transition, they're beginning to face, or not beginning, they're continuing to face the same homelessness challenges that other youth might face or other adults might face in the same vein. So, for instance, they're more prone to experiencing physical or sexual victimization. They have a reduced access to healthcare, and mental health disorders are left untreated as a result of that lack of healthcare access, despite having that access to them. The primary issue with the transitional age homelessness is even though they have access to it for a period of time after they finish, they're not necessarily aware of those support systems because they did not receive adequate planning while they were moving from the years into the adulthood. So a lot of them don't know how to access the healthcare resources available to them or the financial resources available to them. And a lot of them don't really have a support system that allows them to navigate these issues or understand how they can locate resources available to them. So about 77% of them do leave without receiving these services. And as a result, it just limits the knowledge that they have when it comes to facing the healthcare challenges that they are experiencing, which has been estimated to be around a percentage of 80% of foster care youth or TAY students, transitional age youth, or transitional adolescent youth who are experiencing these kind of challenges in their lives. So one of the laws that I took particularly note of was the education of pupils in foster care and pupils who are homeless, which is section 48853.5 of the California Legal Code. So this particular code allows students who are in the foster care system to remain in the school of origin, which is facilitated by an educational liaison that is established at the district level. So in this sense, students are able to remain in whatever school environment they feel most comfortable with or that is deemed to be their school of origin in order to better help them establish a presence and a sense of self wherever they might be during transitions such as transferring between schools or entering the foster care system. In the instance that these foster care students are entering the system or moving from school to school, they are granted the ability to get immediate placement within the school that they are transferring to. And this is initiated without exemption, whether they have any outstanding fees or they do not have their records available readily. They are allowed to enter whichever school they have been assigned or are planning to be assigned immediately once they initiate that process. The current code also allows these students to receive priority access to intersession programs. I realize I made a typo there, which is basically that these students are allowed to have priority registration for programs like summer school or any STEM application or STEM programs that may be happening during periods of time where school is not in session. It can also grant them access to other events such as groups that might be happening during those periods of breaks of time. So for instance, speech and debate is one that is offered at my district level. So they're allowed access where they're able to hone their skills while they're still within the school system. When it comes to these additional privileges and rights established by the code, they are also assigned an educational liaison, which, as I mentioned before, is responsible for collaborating with the school and with the court jurisdiction to establish a place where they are able to remain in school. So they assist in any transfer processes that are occurring, as well as facilitating enrollment within those school systems. They are also entitled to financial aid opportunities and support. So schools or the school district and the county are encouraged to collaborate with one another to ensure that these students are receiving the maximum amount of financial aid that they can receive, as well as identifying and learning how to identify any outside financial opportunities that might be available to them. When it comes to the impact of this specific code on educational functioning, it provides these students an opportunity to learn within their preferred learning environments. So they are able to access their least restrictive environments so that they are placed in a position where they have an equal chance to learn the same materials that their peers might be receiving. They are also allowed the opportunity to foster their well-being in the sense that they are able to participate more often and more readily and have more opportunities to engage in these kinds of activities. When it comes to applying this law as a counselor, it is important for a counselor to become very attuned to these students in the sense that we're building a relationship with them. And this is particularly impactful because these type of students in the school system tend to not have those support systems because of the fact that they are constantly moving around or they're dealing with other kind of struggles within the foster care system, be it a transition process or any other paperwork or trails that they might have to be responsible for. So it's important for a counselor to identify financial aid opportunities, and this is relevant at the high school level for those youth who are pursuing a college level experience. So identifying and directing them to the Chafee Grant or to the EOH youth programs allows them to receive a financial aid structure and support system that helps them make that transition from the high school level to the college level at a financial level again. It also is important for counselors to collaborate during movements of transfer of these processes. So whenever a student is transferring, the more we collaborate with the educational liaison or the education rights holder, whoever that may be, the easier that transition is going to be for the student and the more readily they are able to then interact with us and get to know and allow us to get to know them and better serve their needs. When it comes to the Foster Youth Mental Health Bill of Rights, which is code 16001.9, this code allocates several mental health services to students in the foster care system in the sense that they are able to better attune to their own person. So this specific code is meant to promote their well-being in a way that is comfortable to them and not necessarily those of the people around them. So for instance, foster care who are receiving these mental or that are entitled to these Bill of Rights or these rights, mental health rights, are allowed to express themselves and receive support in a way that is respective to their identity and expression. So if they identify as LGBTQ, for instance, they are allowed to receive whatever grooming, hygiene, or clothing products that match their identity or expressions. They are also allowed to be placed in the least restrictive environment, which allows them to, again, learn in a space that is comfortable to them and promotes their growth. And they are also allowed to have equal access to any extracurricular activities, cultural activities, or traditional activities that might be happening within the spaces around them so that they can continue to explore and promote the well-being of themselves. One of the impacts on their mental health as a result of this code is that it allows them to, again, explore who they are and feel confident in who they are and safe in expressing themselves within the communities that are in. And it guarantees the mental and physical health related services that they require based on who they feel as they are. So what I mean by that is they're allowed to express themselves or receive these services according to their person. It also encourages active participation, be it their mental health autonomy in the sense that they're able to say whether they do or do not want to receive a psychotropic medication, as well as report the effects of that medication to better gauge whether or not it is something that they are interested in pursuing. It also provides them the opportunities to participate in community and school extracurricular activities, which again promotes the growth of that support system around them. When it comes to applications as a school counselor, we can collaborate with these students to encourage them to participate in school-wide programs, as well as identify programs that might align with their interests, as well as help them understand the processes of entering those programs and keep records of what they need to do to make sure that they're eligible or otherwise to remain in those programs. It's also allowing us to collaborate with the education rights holder and the student to identify whatever environments they best learn in. So it is our job as a counselor to understand their needs so that we can better suit their educational learning processes. It also is important for us counselors to understand that we are allowed to allow them whatever mental health resources that might be appropriate to their person. So whether or not they are cisgendered or not, this allows us to then support whatever needs that are respective to their identities. So again, the Mental Health Bill of Rights is something that we can direct them to and help them understand so that they are aware of what rights and privileges they have under these codes. And these are the references that I did find for each of those categories in case anyone was interested in exploring them even further. And that would conclude my presentation.
Thank you, Alejandro. Melissa.
Okay, let's see. Okay, are you able to see it?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I did my presentation on supporting undocumented youth. So when we're talking about undocumented youth, we're talking about students living in the United States without legal immigration status. So this can include both students who recently arrived or those who have grown up here their whole lives. So there are about 10 to 11 million undocumented individuals in the US, and over 1 million are actually youth. So that's why it's prevalent. And there are also many part that are of mixed status families. So some are citizens and some aren't, which creates other complications and stressors as well. And they're an underserved community or group because they don't often have the same access to support, resources, or opportunities. And then that can impact their school life and daily lives as well. So that's where the role of the counselor comes in and is important to support them. So, when we're looking at the current challenges that undocumented youth are facing, a big theme is just constant uncertainty. And I think a lot of that is shaped too by like the current political climate and immigration policies. So, policies like increased enforcement through agencies like ICE and kind of the lack of clear pathway to citizenship all kind of contribute to this ongoing fear. So even when policies shift back and forth, that inconsistency itself creates stress on the students because they never really know what is going to happen next. And then that kind of stress kind of bleeds into their school environment. So they might have trouble focusing or seem unmotivated or disengaged, but it's because they're carrying a lot emotionally as well. And they also might be dealing with basic needs insecurity, so like food or housing instability, especially if their family's financial situation is impacted by immigration status or employment limitations. So there's a lot of like invisible barriers, things like stigma, fear of speaking up, or feeling misunderstood. So they may avoid asking for help or accessing resources because they're unsure of who they can trust with information. Now, for the first legal protection that I found, there was only really two that popped up when I was looking. So this one is Plyler versus Doe. So basically, this says that public schools cannot deny students access to education based on their immigration status. And this is under the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. So the court recognized that education is a fundamental part and fundamental right of being able to participate in society. And they also made a point that even just denying education doesn't just harm that specific individual, but it impacts society as a whole. So even though this law guarantees access, it doesn't mean that students feel safe accessing that right. So that's kind of where we come in. So I have to, as counselor, we have to clearly explain to students and family they have a right to education no matter what, and schools aren't allowed to deny them based on status and that their information is protected. So that's our role as well as counselors. And then the second legal protection that comes in is FERPA. I know that we did a discussion post on this. I won't like, for the sake of time, I won't explain it, but I thought would create like a scenario so that the application, we can like understand it more. Um, so in this scenario, for example, a student comes to me and shares concerns about their family's immigration situation with a counselor. And that's really sensitive information. So under FERPA, I wouldn't be able to share those details with a teacher without the student's consent. But then at the same time, the teacher might notice the student is struggling academically and come to me and ask what's going on. So this is where the counselor role gets important because we kind of have to balance collaboration with confidentiality. So instead of sharing the private information, I could support the teacher by giving general insight or suggesting strategies and letting them know how like the student is dealing with external stressors without disclosing anything specific, but at the same time, I'm contributing to support the student directly in creating a safe space. Now, as for the impact on mental health and educational functioning from these specific laws, They ensure access to education and protect privacy, so that can increase participation and doing well in school. And it also might breed more like help seeking from the student to staff and to me directly. But there still is the limitation that they're fearful of sharing information because they don't know exactly where it could end up, or but that's where again we come in because we have to let them know that we know the law and that will protect them through that. Okay, and then when I think about how I would actually apply all of this as a school counselor, it really just comes down to we have to show up for the students every day. And I think advocacy is huge. That's kind of the most important thing. It's not just knowing that undocumented students have a right to education, but actually making sure they can access the actual opportunities. So again, confidentiality is a huge part of this. So we're not just following the law, but we're creating a space where students feel safe enough to open up. And then that also means being really clear with the students and families about what is private and what isn't, so they're not left guessing. There's no like gray area. And a lot of this just comes down to trust. So I think the main thing I can do, the strategies I can implement is to make sure students are connected to support, whether that's academic help, emotional support, or even outside resources. Sometimes students don't even know what's available to them. So part of my role is just making sure those supports feel accessible and safe to use. And then I also found these additional resources. Some of them like cater more towards elementary school, middle school, high school. I thought they were great resources that I would want to keep handy as a counselor in these specific situations. And then just kind of summing it all up, it's a very complex situation, but I think serving any underserved communities, we're going to have to face those challenges. So it's important to remember that our role is to be the person that's like a safe space and an advocate for our students, and also knowing and understanding the laws so that we can protect and support them in the best ways possible. So my references, and that was all.
Thank you. Next, we have Adriana.
Alrighty, perfect. So I'm gonna go ahead and start sharing. Okay. Okay, so I also did mine on undocumented youth. So just gonna go over understanding the human rights of documented youth, the current challenges, the law that I first have, which is FERPA, and then the second one, which is gonna be Plyer versus Stowe, and then just gonna go over the conclusion. So the first one's going to be understanding undocumented youth. And with this, a lot of students face both challenges of education and mental health being an undocumented youth. One of the biggest issues is the constant fear of deportation, either of themselves or their family members. With this, the fear creates a lot of ongoing stress and anxiety, which makes it difficult sometimes for them to focus in school, and which could be a reasoning why they have a decline in their social or emotional health at school, or with their grades at school as well. They also deal with barriers like limited access to financial aid or language challenges. And sometimes they can also face discrimination or feeling like they don't belong at school. Just a feeling of isolation, of not looking like someone else or not being able to speak like someone else. That can create a lot of mental health issues for students at school. With my experience, so I work at West Los Angeles College in the EOP&S department, and with that, I deal with a lot of students that have a lot of unmet needs, or even students who have like come here from another country, stuff like that. And so I've seen a lot of students that carry a lot of stress from outside responsibilities, and it's definitely affects their confidence as well as their academic performance, and how they just carry themselves around at school as well. So even when they're capable of those external pressures, it can give them like a sense of holdback in their academic journey. And then moving forward with the current challenges. So with that, we just want to really focus on, with this, there's a lot of high level anxiety and stress and potential emotional trauma as well. Like I said, a lot of people have this sense of not belonging at school, and sometimes not people don't have to necessarily tell them something to make them not feel it. It's just a lot of the time, sometimes when someone looks at you a different way or something like that, they just have this insecurity already of constantly having to feel worried. So it's just the stressor and anxiety that youth face at school or just in general. As well as, like I mentioned, financial hardships is limited access to basic needs and resources. So with that, sometimes students don't have a lunch or a snack at school. So that causes another insecurity for them as well, and challenge as well as just stability within food, with financial situations, clothes sometimes, supplies at school. It can cause a lot of insecurity and a lot more anxiety and stress for the student as well. And then along with the language and cultural adjustment as well, sometimes we do have English learners. So with that, kind of connecting the ELL and the undocumented youth, is just that sometimes students that don't speak English as their first language can be another challenge for them as well, because they're trying to adjust at school as well as learn a new language, but then at the same time keep their language that they do speak for at home when they do go home. So just to reiterate kind of the current challenges that students face right now, especially in the world that's going on, some of the big issues is the fear of deportation. With that, many students fear each day, either themselves getting deported or their families getting deported. You never know what can happen. So that's just a constant fear that lives within them and their family members that can also have a big factor to when it comes to their academic growth and their stability with their academics as well. The language barriers, like I mentioned as well, some students are also adjusting to new languages. So with that, it makes school sometimes a little bit harder for them to be able to retain information in class or even understand information that the teacher may be giving them in class as well. And then lastly, another current issue that's huge is the limited access, like I said, to resources, which is just financially, a lot of resources, as well as like food instability as well. So with that, we just want to make sure we make students feel that they have that sense of belonging. And just as, educators, we can always have extra things, creating a safe space for students can talk and be able to create that trust with you, as well as having, extra things to just make them feel a little bit more stable at school. So then just going over just the undocumented youth as counselors, we should have this motto of like every student deserves to belong and feel included, and creating a supportive school community with your coworkers as well as the administration is very important, because this can create improve learning and mental health for all students. It doesn't even have to be just necessarily for undocumented youth, but it's very important just to create that safe environment for all students, because it can have a big, because you never know what students are going through mentally, especially in society and social media and all that going on. A lot of people struggle with, issues beyond just at school. So we just always want to make sure that students feel safe and valued at school. So then moving on to the law number 1, which I went into researching with FERPA. We've talked a lot about this within our textbook. And so with this, it's just the federal law that protects the privacy of students' educational records. And this means that schools cannot share students' personal information, which includes their immigration status, without permission, which is huge, because if a teacher, like Melissa was mentioning in her PowerPoint, if a teacher asks, why is the student struggling? Could it be related to, their immigration status or anything like that, or documentation? You legally cannot disclose that without having permission from the student or the parent. So with that, this is especially important for undocumented students because it helps protect them and their families from being exposed. A lot of the time, sometimes, it does come with a little bit of insecurity. So we don't want to create that even more and heighten that pressure to the families. We want to make sure they feel safe and secure at school. And then also, this applies to all students, regardless of the immigration status, that they have the right to a free education from a public school of K through 12. And then, so just the impact of FERPA, it protects the students' privacy and personal identity. this plays a big role in both their education and their mental health. Like I said, a lot of the time already has that stressor of having an documented child. So with that, we just want to make sure that we are able to build that trust between the staff and the students and their parents. Educationally, it just helps students feel safer attending school because they know their information is protected. So, and there's no judgment behind that. So with that, for the mental health, it also helps reduce the anxiety for the students, allowing students just to feel more comfortable and at ease being at school. With that, it also encourages the school attendance as well. So it's not like you're creating a setup at school. They have the right to attend school and have that free education. So we want to make sure it does encourage student attendance without the fear of that. As well as it just helps students along, like I said, it just helps students feel a lot safer, and it just creating that trust makes a big difference in their success. So moving to law number 2, which is the Plyer versus Doe. This is a Supreme Court case, which was in 1982. This case ruled out that all children, regardless of their immigration status, have the right to a free K through 12 education. So schools cannot deny students access to education based on whether they're documented or undocumented. So this prevents states from creating barriers for school access, which is like the number one thing that we want to do as educators. We want to limit the amount of barriers that we give students and their parents. So we want to just make sure that we're able to give that for students. So this law is just really important because it guarantees that undocumented students still have the opportunity to go to school and receive an education. And then the major impact of the Plyer versus Doe is, like I said, we just want to ensure equal access to public education for students. We want to make sure that it also prevents isolation. So like I said, sometimes a lot of undocumented youth can feel that sense of isolation, but with this, it kind of prevents that isolation, and it makes sure that everyone is able to get a free education no matter what your status of documentation is. As well, it increases a sense of belonging and inclusion. We don't want to create those sense of groups at school. We want all children to play with each other. We want all children to get along with one another, not having to separate them into separate groups because you're documented, you're not. We want to make sure every student has the right to feel free to wherever they are at school. As well as we just want to support their long-term and academic opportunities and their career opportunities as well. So having the access to a K through 12 education gives them those opportunities to further succeed in their future endeavors. And so with this, Stone just really emphasized that this helps ensure, even in unstable situations, that students still have access to education and support within their educational journey. So moving on with the role of a school counselor, just with this, so as a future school counselor, I would apply these laws in different ways. But the main ways that we just want to make sure is that we're advocating for all students. All students should be able to be advocated for, no matter their background, no matter what their culturally background is. As well as we just want to maintain confidentiality and make sure that we're sticking to our ethical responsibilities. With that, we want to also provide students with social and emotional support and connect them to all the resources available, scholarships, food resources. We want to make sure that no matter their situation, that we're giving them as much as possible and helping them be successful for both their family and the student. And most importantly, we just want to foster a safe and inclusive school environment. We want to be able to give students a safe place to be themselves and just to really be stress-free and anxiety-free. Like I said, you never know what a lot of students are going through at home. So we want to be able to give that safe environment for students to feel just at ease at school. And then the application and practice. So with this, it's just we want to avoid unnecessarily asking about immigration status. We don't want to add that more stressor on a student about asking them questions or anything like that. So unless you have to ask about their immigration status, just really try and avoid unnecessarily asking for that. as well as just reassuring students about the confidentiality, making sure that they're able to build that sense of trust with you. And just being supportive to, like I said, access to career and college resources, as well as just seeking resources that these students need broader, not just the basic needs of students, but we want to make sure that we're giving them as much as possible. You never know what they have going on. So we want to make sure that we're seeking all resources beyond just what is in front of us for the student. And then just the conclusion, so undocumented youth face challenges all the time, but with that, we just want to make sure like laws like FERPA and Plier still protect their rights and ensure they have access to education and feel the support that they need at school. And it's just our main responsibility as counselors or future counselors to advocate for students and create that safe space where they can feel that they can succeed to their highest potential and just be able to make them feel seen and supported in every way possible. And then these are my references.
Thank you so much. Let's see, Emily.
Yeah, there you go. Can you hear me now? Okay. Hello. I did it on English learners, so laws and school counselors' responsibilities. Okay, current issues and challenges faced by English learners, language barriers affecting academic performances, difficulty assessing grade level curriculum, social isolation or bullying, family communication barriers, and higher risk for stress, anxiety, and lower self-confidence. I had a similar experience actually in doing my practicum at a high school. A student was struggling in her science class, and the teacher initially just believed that she wasn't paying attention. And when she was referred to the school counselor, the student shared or explained that she was having difficulty understanding in class. So the school counselor supported her and initially gave her a teacher assistant or IA to help support her in class with translation. And the teacher agreed, and she spoke to the student and shared that it's okay to feel like you didn't understand, but always ask questions. You never know. So I felt like that was a very good like example as an English learner, because she didn't like expect that to get that support that she needed, and she just thought like she was just gonna get the blame for not like understanding. So law versus Nicholas, requires schools to provide language support services. Schools must ensure equal access to education for English learners, and still in effect today and guides bilingual and ESL programs. The case involved the Chinese-speaking students in San Francisco who are struggling in school because they were not provided with the English language support services. So they believed that they were getting English classes, but it was more of a equality English course and not equity English course. So they weren't like helping them like learn English. It was more like if they were getting a literature class. In 1974, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the students, stating that simply providing the same education to all students is not equal if some students cannot understand the language of instruction. So the decision led to the development of bilingual education and English language development across the United States and continues guiding policies that support English learners today. For Law 2, every student succeeds, and Act in the ESSA is published by the Title III. So it's a federal law supporting English learners. It requires schools to monitor language progress. It provides funding for English learners instruction, and it promotes academic achievement and language development. The Every Student Succeeds Act was signed by President Obama in 2015. It reauthorized from 50-year-old the Elementary Secondary Education Act from the ESEA. It was the national education law and long-lasting commitment to equal opportunity for all students. The impact of these laws on students, it improves access to instruction, academic support, it reduces frustration and acceptance, supports mental health by promoting belonging and encouraging equitable opportunity in education. So the way they monitor with assessments for the ESSA Act is one of them is called the LPAC. They do the LPAC course placement assessment for English learners. So basically that from elementary to high school, they take this LPAC test. If they don't pass it, they have to take 2 ESL courses to pass the LPAC. The only problem or issue is that if they don't pass the course, they do not receive an elective. So basically means that they don't get an art class or any music or any extracurriculum. So how we stand is we will have to support those students or create a program or a course schedule where we could support them with arts that doesn't involve like having them take 2 English classes. So English learners in California must take the LPAC, the Proficiency Act, results determined to level of English, and supports who needs additional support by scheduling into 2 ESL classes. So it limits their access to electives. But the way how we could advocate is by advocate for appropriate language support services, collaborate with teachers and families, monitor academic and emotional progress of EL students, and provide culturally responsive counseling, and ensure students' rights under federal and state laws and protection. According to Stone, school counselors must advocate for equitable educational services and ensure students receive appropriate support. The ASCA ethical standard emphasizes that promoting access, equity, and success for all students include English learners. And these are my references. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Elsie.
Okay, I'm here. Hi, guys. Let me just reduce this and present it. Okay, not only did I dress like Alejandro, I have the same topic as Alejandro. I did my project on foster youth. So here I just wanted to describe or show you guys a couple of different examples of what foster youth families might look like. At the top, you have kind of a kinship care situation where grandparents have adopted a child. You might have a single parent home. You might have a lot of kids that are mixed, biological and non-biological. Some foster families have a lot of kids. I used to work in a group home with Olive Crest in Santa Ana, and so this kind of represents what a group home situation might look like. And this down here is my brother who just adopted these 2 beautiful baby boys. So adoption and foster are close to our hearts. Some current issues that are in this population are number one, the trauma. There's trauma from just being separated from their parents and potentially their siblings, but definitely they're torn out of their home and they're placed elsewhere. And that can be a super traumatic incident. There might have been abuse or neglect in the home as well. And all of this leads to the mental health issues that we could see in the schools. So we might see developmental delays, behavioral issues, physical health issues, etc. Another current issue of this population is absenteeism. So they're going to be transferred from school to school, home to home. They might have parental visitations as their parents might be trying to regain custody. This also includes court hearings for custody as well. They could have various appointments or just kind of behavioral issues. Also, we have relocation is another issue. A lot of the foster placements might not work, adoptions fail, etc. And I am opening different windows here. All right. 2 supporting laws I wanted to go over are both educationally related. AB 1933 is regarding if they have different residencies, they're moving their homes, they do not have to also transfer schools. And AB 167/216 is regarding if they're kind of not doing too well in schools, they don't have to graduate by the district's requirements. They can just go by the California state requirements and still get their high school diploma. So for AB 1933, foster children can be changing residences often. This can be like 5 times on average. And they're changing their home, they're changing their school. But to mitigate this, this law allows the students to stay in their school of origin and or their school feeder pattern, even if the child changes school levels or moves out of the school district due to foster placement. So say they're in one district through elementary and they're now going to middle school, they can stay in that same district and have the same friend group and have the same kind of why is this on the bottom? I'm sorry, guys. Have the same social stability. So the effects that this has on the students is educationally, the law maximizes their education. It's keeping foster youth in class and not constantly having to relearn new classes or having to reestablish themselves at new schools. Sometimes this is annually, sometimes this is mid-year, and that's very difficult for students on their education. Emotionally, they can retain their social and peer groups. Even if their home life is ever changing or unstable, they can rely on the familiar faces at school and they can grow and deepen in those relationships, which is extremely important. So the application for us as school counselors with this population, with this law, is number one, we're prioritizing the foster students' placement and we're facilitating quick enrollment. We need to make sure to maintain their records to avoid any gaps in their schooling and just keep them in their educational progress. This also means that we're going to be working really closely with the foster youth's team members. Foster youth tend to have a lot of people on their team, not only like their caseworker, but they have attorneys. As was mentioned in the prior presentation, the educational rights holder is a super, super important person for us to know who they are. This could be the foster parent. It could also be the group home manager. It could be somebody else, but for us to be in communication with that person as that person is the one who is working in the best interest of the child. Let's see. Okay, going on to the next one, Assembly Bill 167/216. So if foster students are behind in their credits and they transferred schools after their second year of high school, they can be eligible to graduate under this bill by completing only the state graduation requirements, which is 130 credits, instead of their school district's requirements. So an example of this would be the A through G requirements of LAUSD include health and ethnic studies, but that's not mandatory for California State. The effect on the students is educationally supporting them, earning a diploma, and we're even allowing them to be able to go to college if they want to. Emotionally, foster youth, they're getting credit here for the hardship that they've endured throughout their childhood. Maybe their personal life affected their academics and they're getting help to complete the final steps of their K through 12 education for that diploma. The application as a school counselor here, number one, we have to know what the California graduation requirements are. As I kind of mentioned earlier, it's 130 credits. Number two, school counselors must inform eligible foster students of their right to this option within 30 days of their school transfer. And this includes consulting with them and their educational rights holder about their options. If they do not qualify when they transfer, the school must reassess whether they qualify within the first 30 days of the next school year. And they can also request a reassessment at any time, and the school must complete that within 30 days as well. Number three, foster students have the right to stay in the high school for a 5th year to complete their school district requirements or the state graduation requirements, even if they're over 18. So if they wanted to complete their A through G requirements in order to qualify for a UC or a CSU, they are allowed to do that while still graduating as well. And those are my references. Thank you.
Thank you. Well done. Caitlin.
Okay, so I did my group on the LGBTQ plus youth community. And if you don't know what the community is, it's people that represent different identities, expression of gender, and sexual orientation that are typically on the younger side. So they usually say up to 25, that would be the youth, and then after it would be without the youth. Um, the name stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and the plus is to represent everybody that may not be on that list, for example, like pan. Current issues is there's been a big decline in mental health. There's been an increase in anxiety symptoms reported from 58% to 68%, and depression symptoms from 48 to 54%, according to the Trevor Project. There was also an incline in suicide thoughts, and I think it was up to 10% also. This is due to either not feeling supported, they've been harassed, threatened, there's been a lot of hate crime still happening in them, and a lot of violence in the community. They also experience bullying and cyberbullying. About 44.9% report being online harassed. Suicide is the main cause in this community, and so it kind of just shows you the big impact this community has on mental health. Um, Laws, it is very hard with these laws because it differs between each school, state, and a lot of states are trying to protect against these laws, but some of the ones that are negativity against this community is the Parental Rights and Education Act. And this law allows parents to opt their child out of certain lessons that they feel like they're not comfortable to send their child in. They get to see the curriculum and be informed of any changes within their child. This act allowed for certain topics and books to be banned in school. This act also allows for parents to be informed of their child of any changes. And the quote was, "Parents and guardians have a federal constitution right to be informed if their public school student child expresses gender incongruence." And then another law that is, again, different for every school and state and depends on where you're at, but transgender restriction school. So many schools are in different states banning transgender from using the bathroom what they express their gender as, or banning sports that they match their gender expression. Some schools even ban the use of using the proper pronoun of their choice. So how does this impact mentally and educational functioning? By allowing parents to opt their child out, they're not able to learn about the community. And I think just even learning about the community can really help make a change within our society, just so they understand better what it is and it's normal to be around. And then it also sets a biased view kind of within the school setting and blocks out certain historical groups and events that are important for children to know. And this also law allows for parents to be informed that their child expressed gender change, which can be hard for many students because they may not feel ready to come out to their parents yet, and it can mentally impact them. And by not allowing trans students to be able to express themselves freely from their gender expression is that's what typically causes a depression, anxiety in the community, and they kind of just feel stuck and not supported, and mentally that could also affect them. So it's hard as a school counselor because we obviously have to follow the law, but the biggest thing that we can do is be their biggest advocate in situations like this. Just doing presentations kind of about the impact of this community and what we can do to change in school can really make a difference. And trying to advocate, something we can advocate for is neutral bathrooms. This allows for transgender to openly use the bathroom without judgment. And also just having a safe LGBTQ plus youth community group counseling. They're able to feel supported within themselves and able to express themselves and hear other stories within the community. This allows for talks of mental health in the community and to learn more also within this group. In conclusion, while there is negative laws, there are also impactful laws. Like in California, there's a Shields law, and just different states are trying to change and go around these type of different acts and laws. But I think the most important thing in this situation is just being a big advocate for them and to build trust and support within the group. That is all. Thank you.
Thank you, Caitlin. Next, we have Jordan.
Okay, I'm not the best at doing this. I press the share, right? Okay. Okay, there we go. Ready? Okay. So I'm going to be talking about special needs children in education. I kept the layout similar to how the assignment was structured just for clarity. So we're going to be going over the current issues and challenges, the laws, how the laws have an effect on the students, and then also practical application. So first is the current issues. So children with special needs face a tremendous challenge of being marginalized due to laws that are better supported now, but there's still lots of roadblocks that they face. Some of the challenges that they do face stem from their educators' challenges. So when the educator or guardian of the student falls short, needs are left unmet, and they're not given the proper support and education they need and deserve. So there's a couple of educator challenges that I'll talk about, and then a couple of student ones. So the insufficient teacher training and lack of resources. Um, so when proper training is necessary for students with special needs, if these students are not properly understood, they cannot receive the education they need to succeed. With limited resources, teachers may not be properly trained. This is a cyclical effect. Teachers need adequate training to better serve all their students, but due to resource constraints, they may not be able to access the training they need, which in turn leads to inadequate teaching to special needs students. Next is stigma and social challenges. Students with special needs face many different stigmas and prejudices. These children also face daily social challenges such as a struggle to connect with their peers or bullying. These challenges and stigmas have an effect on their social development and self-esteem, making it even harder for them to succeed academically. And then as a transition to adulthood is the last one. So for older special needs students, there's often a struggle to transition from secondary education into adulthood. This struggle is amplified by the lack of resources surrounding a transition plan. Next, we have the laws. So there's two main laws. The first is the Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. It was created in 1973, and it provides civil rights protections in most public schools. It's a non-discrimination law, but unlike the IDEA law, it doesn't provide any funding. It also goes hand in hand with the American Disabilities Act, which was created in 1990. It's also an anti-discrimination law, but it has different protection rights for students. And the second one is the IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disability Education Act from 1975. So this is also an anti-discrimination law, but this one mandates free, appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. So it makes it to be more inclusive for these special needs students. It also provides federal funding to schools. There's also kind of big stipulations to get IDEA funding and also for students to be considered eligible underneath it. There's like 13 different categories that they fall under, and they must fall under into one of those. So those are the two laws. And then next is how they affect the student. So kind of from there came two different ideas of the IEPs and then inclusion. So IEPs is the Individualized Education Program. So the district develops a IEP for the student. It's a plan of action and has specific guidelines on what it must contain. And then inclusion is um, where they need to implement the least restrictive environment, and they need to do that as often as possible and as much as they can for the students. There also should be social inclusion too. And then students with special needs should be around students without special needs to help them develop more effectively and build their self-confidence better. And then next we have the practical application. I like this quote from the ASCA website, and it says that the school counselor takes an active role in student achievement and post-secondary planning by providing a school counseling program for each and every student. So there's different ways that counselors can do the practical application. They can provide direct and indirect services through the implementation of counseling programs. Some direct services could be classroom lessons, individualized group counseling, short-term goal-focused counseling that aligns with the student's IEP or 504 plan. And then regarding the IEP 504 plan, as counselors, we can help identify what students may need to be assessed so they can get the support and education they need. Collaborating can look like encouraging the family to be involved, having deeper conversations with staff as well as the family to get to know the student better and how to better meet their needs, and also working with other support professionals to learn about how to serve the student better. Advocating means to stand up for these students' rights and needs in the school and also in the community. And lastly, assistance can look like helping with the development of academic, transition, and post-secondary plans. Students with disabilities need a little bit more of care and attention, but by no means are they incapable. Just like students without disabilities, they deserve to have adults in their lives who believe in them and can help them succeed, however that may look. Alrighty, and that's it from the presentation.
Thank you. Gilbert.
All right. Okay. Is it working? Can you guys see? No, right? Oh man, that's weird. Okay. Okay. Should work now. Okay, can you guys see now?
Yes.
Right.
Yes, we
Okay,
can.
perfect. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so I'm doing mine on foster youth as well. This is something that's pretty relevant to me just because I was actually in the system myself, so I just felt like I know a lot about it, and it's pretty cool to like look at all the laws and stuff surrounding it. So a lot of the current issues right now, a lot of times foster youth, right, they experience instability in both like their homes or even like in education. A lot of them move from like one place to another, which can mean like changing schools multiple times. This can cause like disruptions in like learning, especially because if you're moving from school to schools, um, the pace is different. A lot of kids tend to be behind in their education, and it also makes it hard to form friendships and just build relationships with teachers as well. When you're constantly moving, you might finally make a friend or finally feel like you're comfortable with the teacher, and then boom, you're displaced and you're going somewhere else. You're at another school, and it's kind of discouraging as a kid to constantly be doing that. It makes you not want to make relationships because it makes it hard every time you got to step away from that relationship. Um, so yeah, the first law was the McKinney. It's a Venture Homeless Assistance Act. I know it says homeless, but a lot of foster youth, right? They tend to be homeless. I think like 30% of foster youth make up the homeless population. Um, so in order to qualify for this, you would have to be like in temporary housing or like an unstable placement. Um, this is important because it gives students stability and it reduces the stress of like starting over. For a lot of students, having that stability at school at least can make them feel like safe and build these strong relationships with both peers and teachers. Kind of like how I mentioned, right? When you're able to stay at one school, it gives you that sense of like a community and gives you hope. And I just feel like that's like the biggest thing for a student, right? Having that community and having people that you grow up with, having the teachers to back you up and not having to like introduce yourself to a new class every single time because it's pretty scary. Um, and then so like how does it affect mental health and educational functioning? Um, so when foster youth is like um when you're able to stay in the same school, right? Like how I mentioned, you're able to like just feel safe. Your attendance tends to be a lot better, and your academic performance tends to be better. Those that happen to stay in the same school and are able to like um, not be bouncing from place to place, the graduation rates are a lot higher. I should have put the statistic. I'm not entirely sure what the statistic was off the top of my head. I know I read it about it, but it was a lot higher than if they're constantly moving around. Um, and like I said, it just gives you a sense of stability and belonging, something that every student wants and needs. And then the second law was the Every Student Succeeds Act, ESSA. I think Emily mentioned this law as well. Obama came up with it, I believe, in like 2015. And again, hence the every student, so the foster youth applies to this. Um, this law recognizes that foster youth often face barriers in schools. The ESSA requires students to enroll with foster youth immediately, even if they don't have like school records or documents. It also requires schools and child welfare agencies to work together to support the student. So this just gives kids the opportunity to go to school. You don't have to deal with all that document nonsense and all that stuff, and you end up falling behind in education. It makes it really easy for the kids to actually be able to get to school on time and not feel like they're just stuck in wherever home situation they're in, right? Sometimes being at school is the best place for them, and that's where they feel the safest and the most like free. And so how does this affect the students? It just helps the foster youth stay connected to their education during like a difficult transition. Immediate enrollment means students do not lose valuable like instruction time. Working together as a team helps make sure that the students' needs are met. So it's important to put the students first and have their best interest at mind always. So like the roles of school counselor, right? I would use these laws to make sure foster youth receive stability and support. I would advocate for students to stay in the same school whenever and possible and provide counseling for the emotional challenges they face. I would also make sure students have access to resources that can help them succeed. I think as a school counselor, right, especially being able to relate to this, even at the school I work at, I know there's some kids that actually come from um, foster places, like not even just homes, but they're staying like if anyone's familiar with like in Orange County, I think it's called Orangewood. That's Orangewood. I forgot exactly what it's called, but it's like a foster place. And I know there's kids at my school that come from there, and they take them. They have transportation that takes them to the school, and kind of like how I read in some of the acts, they were able to stay at the same schools while going through the difficult like situations. And I think it's helped them a lot to be able to stay at the same schools because they could easily, since they move, like they could take them somewhere in that area, um, and it's gonna just cause a lot of chaos. And I think they understand that. Um, and then these are just my references. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Next, we have Kiara.
Sorry, I'm trying to see if I could make this bigger. There we go. Okay, so hi, I'm Kiara Murillo, and I did my presentation on English language learner students. So, what are English language learner students? According to the Glossary of Education Reform, English language learners are students who are unable to communicate fluently or learn effectively in English. This could be an example of newcomer students, students coming from other countries, and I believe that newcomer students are identified as newcomers from 1 to 3 years of becoming a new student here in the United States. But this could also mean it could be students where English wasn't spoken at their home as a primary language. So they could be born here, but since their family members may be more comfortable in another language, then they haven't really mastered the language of English. So some challenges, for the academic challenges and resources, English language learners have not really reached that English proficiency to succeed in schools like other students. And also a thing to point out is English language learners may not also be literate in their first language. So actually, I work at a school and I have a student where he has no longer been identified as a newcomer, but he never also mastered like reading in Spanish or English. So even though he is noted as a long-term English learner, I feel like he's been like
kind of like overlooked by the system of like he needs that extra support. Also, language diversity is growing in the United States. So in this website, it discussed that even though Spanish is the primary language for many English learners, now since the United States is obviously becoming way more diverse, other languages are being more present in other of the children's homes, but then there's not really a lot of resources or workers that also speak that language to support those students. Socially, students maybe feel defeated or unmotivated to do their schoolwork because they haven't mastered English, so it's a little harder. Also, there's a lot of inconsistent help. So in some classes, there are bilingual tutors and some there are not. Once again, I work at a school, so I help with an English class. So I help with a lot of English learners, but then I talk to them and they're like, yeah, in my science and math class, there's no help. So then I have to like try to figure that out on my own. A really big challenge that I would like to point out is what's happening currently with the increase in stricter policies with immigration. Although not all students that are English learners are undocumented, they can be undocumented or their family members. So it could increase anxiety or fear attending school. So that also just adds another layer of why they may not be achieving the best. Some impactful laws. So the first law that I chose was the Title VI of Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits discrimination based on race, color, and national origin in programs or activities that receive federal financial assistance. So obviously this prohibits the violation of Title VI, including schools. And then it also, I believe that the civil rights have resources and organized resources and that they're available for English language learners and families who speak limited English. And this is also translated in many languages for them to know at schools or other like federal buildings of what resources they have for their families. Another one is Equal Educational Opportunities Act of 1974, the EEOA. So this accommodates students regardless of nationality and provides adequate resources for English learners. This is kind of like an extension of the Civil Rights Act, but in 1982, they also added that undocumented students are obligated to attend schools like all children. So I feel like that was really important because despite their legal status, then the country doesn't care about that as long as the kids are being provided with the same amount of education and resources. So how do these laws help the students? So obviously the federal and state funding in schools provides resources and opportunities for English learners while being protected from discrimination. So an example of this would be tutors or even just bilingual teachers for the students to feel more comfortable learning English as well as just going through their regular classes. Also, it acknowledges the educational disparities in schools while federally protecting and funding support for English learners. And then lastly, the funding allows for these resources like tutoring, like as I mentioned, but it also enables them, the students to feel more socially and academically supported. So like I said, as a tutor, and I work in Compton, so there's predominantly a lot of Latinos, so a lot of English learners that are Spanish speaking, but some of the teachers aren't bilingual in Spanish. So they come to me a lot feeling a little bit more comfortable because I share a lot of identities with them. So I could see that they kind of go to me more for that support. And it's really amazing to feel that I could be that like source of help for them. As well as another important thing about these funding and these resources is that the schools that are gaining these funding, it also makes sure that they're protecting and creating a safe environment for the students. Applying these laws to school counseling, I divided this in 3 categories. So finding resources, of course, I mentioned getting tutors for the students, right? You want to see what classes maybe need additional help. And then also just meeting with the students and families, if since I have the privilege to know Spanish, then maybe I could meet up with students that I know that are English learners with needs of learning with balancing Spanish and English, and I could work with them and say, okay, what do you guys need from me? As well as other students that may not speak a language that I know, I could try to find other resources with them and just try to communicate as best as possible. The second is advocate, of course. So I want to make sure that I see that the funding is used correctly, that nothing is being abused, and also just reporting and supporting any report and supporting the children when there's any violation of these laws, right? So if there's any discrimination going against any students with their nationality or their what is it? They're struggling with their language, then I want to make sure that I'm their support. As well as using data. This is really mentioned a lot in our textbooks, right? So I would want to make sure that how is my school going to be how are we going to be classifying students as English learners? How are we going to make sure that these students are being placed in the appropriate classes as well as getting enough support? So if we don't have enough tutors for all these students, then maybe I could group them into like a specific class so then they have that peer support as well in that community. And then lastly, I would track the progress of everything. So just making sure that I'm using our resources as a school effectively to help these students. And then these are my references. Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur.
Okay, can you guys hear me? So I did law and ethics. So first I'll talk about the current issues. Next will be the laws, the effects, and then the use case as a counselor. There we go. Homeless youth are at an immense disadvantage over traditionally housed students. Um, I know at my current school, we have a lot of students actually that are homeless. Um, So it's been really helpful actually to do this project so then I can learn how to help them, aside from going to the counselors for every little thing. One of the laws that stood out to me was the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act. It's the ability for community-based youth projects to provide temporary housing to these students. The next one was the Higher Education Act of 2008. We might know what this is because it's based on FAFSA, it's based on the Teach Grant and work study programs. The effect of having this is that housing plays an immense role on the students, and I've noticed once the kids get into better housing, their grades go through the roof, and it's so much easier because they're not focused on the assignment that's due next week. They're focused on where they're going to live tonight. And then it doesn't really impact my students because I work at a junior high, but it influences the students when they go to high school. They see their dreams and sometimes they don't want to go for them just because they can't afford it. So knowing that there is programs like FAFSA or other programs like that, it helps them to stay motivated and reach their goals. One way that I would help in particular with the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act, um, you could keep a list of like shelters or other temporary housing if the school allows that. Um, and then looking towards the Higher Education Act, I know in my current school counselor's office, they have a big poster board with all the grants that our students are usually being accepted for. So then it's easier for them to just, where do I go for this? Where do I go for this? And then fill it out. And then references. Thank you.
Thank you, Alejandro. Kaylee.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, I'll make this fast because I also did homeless youth. But who are homeless youth? So they are unaccompanied minors ages 12 through 17 who are living apart from their parents or legal guardians. Sorry, one second. Can you still see my screen? Sorry, I can't see anybody.
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. I'm so sorry. Okay. Some of those living conditions are including sleeping on friends' couches, staying in shelters, living under bridges, in abandoned buildings, and on streets. Some of the challenges of youth homelessness, there are chronic health conditions like asthma, tuberculosis, diabetes, HIV, AIDS, STDs, and then there's an elevated risk of mental health problems like anxiety, depression, PTSD, and suicide. About 30 to 40% of homeless youth report alcohol problems, and about 40 to 50% report drug problems. Homeless youth report regular encounters with law enforcement and police as well that result in unaffordable fines and criminal records. So a couple of laws that stood out to me for homeless youth were McKinney-Vento Act, which I think Gilbert talked about. It's a federal law for homeless youth that ensures immediate enrollment despite having a permanent address or documents. And it requires transportation to and from school, and it provides stability to support students and families for their success. And then SB 445, which is native to California and geared toward homeless and foster youth, is a law that focuses on school stability for homeless youth by allowing youth to remain at their school of origin for the duration of their homelessness and helps transfer credits if necessary. And it allows students to stay with their peers regardless of their home situation, which is good for their mental health, which leads me to the impact of these laws on mental health and education. So, for mental health, the stability of these laws directly impacts and improves the trauma and stress of housing insecurity. The laws also provide access to support services like mental health, dental, etc., to increase safety and protection. For education, these laws provide academic help like partial credit for classes and flexibility by preventing retake courses when involuntary moves happen. And the laws also target chronic absences with provided transportation. And then the role of the school counselor is to be an advocate to educate staff about homeless youth rights and ways teachers or admin can help support them at school. The counselor can also support by connecting students to free meals, school supplies, and counseling and therapy sessions to help their education further. And then finally, help with school stability by awarding partial credits and reviewing transcripts to prioritize essential courses for graduation, and adjustments can be made to their plans for success as needed. And those are my references.
Thank you, Haley. Juliet.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, we can. Just hit slideshow and you'll be ready.
Okay, so I'm doing my presentation on socially and economically disadvantaged youth. Why is it like this?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. So the current issues and challenges. So common challenges are poverty and low family income, food insecurity, unstable housing, homelessness, lack of school supplies, like technology, transportational problems, high stress, anxiety at home, limited parental involvement due to work, and the impact of these common challenges are attendance, behavior, and academic performance. And students may struggle to focus in class because of their basic needs are not always being met. Law number one is Title I, Part A. This first law is under the Every Student Succeeds Act, and it provides federal funding to schools with a high number of low-income students attending that school. The goal of this law is to help close the achievement gap and provide those resources to disadvantaged students. Schools may offer funds for tutoring, counseling services, academic support programs, after-school programs, extra supplies and resources. I know the school that I work in has a community room and they have extra backpack supplies, clothes that students can go and grab if they need them. The second law is the McKinney and Vento Act, as mentioned before, with other students. And this act is a homeless assistance act, protects students who are homeless or living in an unstable house due to economic hardships in families. Um, this act allows students to receive transportation, attend school even without documents, and stay in their school of origin as well. And then this slide talks about mental health and educational impact some of these students may face. And having these laws improve both mental health and academic success among these students. Without the support, students may experience depression, stress, anxiety, low self-esteem, poor attendance, and low grades. And application as a school counselor. As a school counselor, I would apply these laws by identifying students in need, providing academic emotional support, working them with the McKinney-Vento cooperation. And counselors must act as advocates for equity and student success. And my role as a future school counselor, I would support these students emotionally, academically, and socially, and helping these students will hopefully help them with their attendance, their grades, and their overall academic journey. And these are some of my resources. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Haley. Thank you, Haley. Esmeralda?
Can you see my screen?
No.
No? Okay. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay. So I did mine on English learners. Okay, so the California Department of Education classifies English learners as students who have not achieved English language proficiency within a specified amount of years, and students who have not been reclassified as fluent English proficient. They make up 17.4% of student population. So some current issues. English learners may require additional language support. They may struggle to speak, read, and write fluently in English. They may have low academic performance, and this can also affect their confidence levels. So the English language development supports K through 12 students. It provides students access to subject area content, have readily available resources for students to access, help build their English skills, and guide language development. And then another one would be the Every Student Succeeds Act. So the main purpose of this act is to protect disadvantaged and high needs students. It requires that all students be taught standards that will help them succeed in college and career settings. There's an annual statewide assessment that measures student progress towards those standards, and it implements action plans for low performing schools. So one way that I could apply this as a school counselor would be to help place English learners in the appropriate classes, help connect them with outside resources if needed, ensure that students are actually receiving proper support, advocate for the students, and create a safe space for students that will encourage them to learn.
Thank you. Rebecca?
Let's see. Oh, can you guys see the slideshow? Oh,
No, we can't.
I'm sorry, I can't see anyone. Okay, so you said, okay, let's see. I'm sorry about that. So share, I need to share the window. Okay. Okay, is it up now?
It says has started sharing. Double click to enter. There you go.
Okay. So I also did homeless youth. So I'll just kind of go through the laws have already been mentioned, but so the legal definition that I found from the McKinney-Vento Act was homeless students are students who lack a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. This thing, as mentioned, it includes children living with other families due to economic hardship, living on campgrounds, cars, etc., and also includes migrant children who whose families are moving seasonally for employment in agriculture, the agriculture or fishing field. So some of the barriers to school have already been mentioned: moving to school, district to district, lack of transportation, absenteeism. The states report an average of 47.7 homeless students were chronically absent, decreased academic achievement, a stigma surrounding homelessness, and then just increased risk of dropping out. It's a statewide average of 69% of homeless students graduate from high school. A lot of the increased vulnerability has already been mentioned. One thing that I found interesting was just a higher rate of suicide ideation and attempts. Obviously, substance abuse, unsafe sexual practices. They're vulnerable to trafficking and criminal activity. And then some homeless youth are unaccompanied minor, meaning that they don't live with adults because of abuse or neglect. And then just having unmet needs, so lack of access to different resources, which have already been mentioned. So I also found the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. One thing that was important about this act is they put into place every state who receives funding has to have a homeless liaison. So the liaison is overseeing different programming and coordination for students who are experiencing homelessness. So one thing that has been mentioned, but I thought was interesting, is just the additional career and college support for high school students, making sure there transfers credit from prior schools, and just also if students are unaccompanied minors, that they are able to be immediately enrolled without guardianship. So I thought that was interesting as well. And then transportation to and from school is required. I work at the elementary level, so that's a lot. I mean, for elementary students, right, that's really helpful to help them be present at school. And then also Title I Part A of the of ESA. What I found was different for the funding here is that it's set aside funding. So schools who have 50% or more free and reduced lunch, students who receive free and reduced lunch are considered Title I, but Part A sets aside additional funding for specific to serving homeless students, and it can be used for both academic and then just those educationally related support services. So food, clothing, transportation, etc. Oh, and then also, even if a student who's experiencing homelessness is not attending a Title I designated school, they are still eligible to receive the Title I funds, like that's set aside for them. And then let's see, I'm sorry, I can't see the top of I can't see my heading here. So just the impact of the laws. Let's see if there's anything that hasn't been covered. I just think that having someone, having a liaison for McKinney-Vento in charge of coordinating everything that maybe helps make sure certain things are in place that would not normally be in place. They are responsible to report and track certain aspects of things that are happening for homeless students, which might otherwise, not be done if that position wasn't mandated. Let's see, the social supports and stability are increased because students can remain at their school of origin. Title I, Part A. Let's see. I think I covered all that already in terms of how that helps and impacts better educational opportunities for students who are experiencing homelessness. And then I just wrote down a bunch of different applications. I think some of the main ones are just to know who, know, which already been mentioned, but have students who are experiencing homelessness be identified, like they're on your radar. Especially in terms of if you're working at the high school level, make sure that you're giving them the extra support that they're not getting maybe at, elsewhere to advise, prepare, and improve them or improve their readiness for college and career. I am not sure, but I would be interested to find out if school counselors or administrators have access to McKinney-Vento and Title I funds, and if so, how that works in terms of if you need to allocate that for something. Okay, so that's a no. And just being the advocate, make sure you're collaborating with all the different players involved, coordinating and supporting, different services. And it's already been said, but just creating that, a welcoming and sensitive environment. And then also being aware that some students might not want to talk about what's going on with them and letting them, not forcing them, but also letting you know that you're there for them if they need you or are interested or need support. So that's it.
Thank you, Rebecca. Yeah, the coordinator does it all for the schools, for all the different schools. So they distribute the funding for it and make sure that each school has the supply for that group. And then you go back to your coordinator if there's any other needs. Gabriella, we have Gabriella and Jasmine left.
Okay, is it working? Okay.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, I don't know how to do it full screen, so.
It's full screen for us. If you just scroll
Oh,
down, I think we should be able to see.
okay.
We should be okay.
So mine was supporting the LGBTQ youth, and what it stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender. I can't. I'm sorry, transgender and queer and questioning individuals. I didn't know what the plus sign meant, so it includes pansexual, non-binary, a gender queered, bigender, and gender variant. So I just thought that was useful information because I really had no idea of it. The book talks about it a little bit, so that was very interesting. And it includes students of all races and cultures and backgrounds. The challenges currently for the LGBTQ community and youth is 41% of them consider seriously attempting suicide. They constantly feel sad or hopeless. They encounter a lot of bullying, especially at school, compared to students that don't identify themselves as LGBTQ students. And also, they're less likely to feel safe at school. They do use more substance abuse than any other, I guess, community. Also, well, these challenges directly affect their academic performance, attendance, and their emotional well-being. So they have various protections. They're protected under a federal law called Title IX, which prohibits sex-based discrimination in federally funded education programs as public school. So There's no sex discrimination, sexual harassment, sexual assault and violence, and gender-based discrimination. I also found that another thing was added on it. The Supreme Court ruled that sexual orientation or gender identity is a form of sex discrimination. So that was a recent court case, Boxton versus Clayton County. So students, I have it here in my notes. Students, so the impact of that law is that students can use different type of restrooms based on whatever gender they want to, it's express. The next law I found for protection for LGBTQ community was the California Fair Education Act, which this means that schools are required to put contributions of the LGBTQ plus in their curriculum. So it also prohibits the use of discriminatory or biased materials. In other words, there's increased visibility and representation in the school. It reduces the stigma and bias in education in schools through education and supports students that identify that it's a safer community for them. The role of a counselor, advocate the enforcement of Title IX protections. It is a federal law, so if it doesn't abide, there is repercussions. To promote inclusive curriculum aligned with California Fair Education Act. Also, it provides a safe, affirming spaces for LGBTQ plus students. It supports students experiencing bullying or discrimination. Also, it educates staff and families on inclusivity and connects students with mental health resources. In other words, as school counselors, we play a key role in advocacy, support, and implementation. And these were my references, and that's it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. And Jasmine.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So I did mine on undocumented youth. Some of the current challenges that they face is mental health issues such as anxiety, stress, and fear of deportation. They also have fear of family separation. And they also hesitate to seek and ask for help just because of the fear again of like being judged and profiled. Some of their educational challenges include limited financial aid and college access, language barriers, lack of guidance and support. And this affects their academic performance, attendance, and just like their overall well-being. The first slide is the Plyler versus Doe. This is based on the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. This just means schools cannot deny enrollment based on their status, and they cannot ask for proof of citizenship in ways that will affect or prevent their enrollment in school. This impact on students, it ensures access to education regardless of their immigration status, promotes inclusion and opportunity for academic growth. However, students may still face discrimination beyond K through 12. So like in college, I know sometimes like they get scared, and that's another reason why a lot of them tend to not go into higher education, just because they're scared. I also wanted to talk about the DACA. This is a federal policy created in 2012 for undocumented youth who arrived as children. It provides temporary protection from deportation, but it's renewable. It grants work authorization and access to some opportunities, such as driver's licenses in some states. However, it does not provide permanent legal status or citizenship. Some positive impacts is that it increases student motivation. It allows them to work and pursue college and careers. However, some of these challenges is ongoing certainty due to changing political status. So a lot of them fear like, oh, well, what if like one day it just gets taken away from me? So that's like another addition to the anxiety, leads to stress and fear about the future. And then roles as a counselor, advocating for students' rights to education under the Plyler versus Doe, ensuring a safe, confidential, and supportive environment for students, providing mental health support for stress, trauma, and anxiety, being able to guide students on college scholarships and career options, like DACA-related opportunities for those students that are under those circumstances, and collaborating with families to connect to community and legal resources. And then here's just my resources. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your patience this evening. 17 people is really hard to get through in our time frame. And so I always want everybody to be aware of that. Thank you for staying and supporting your cohort and all of the presentations. I had one other thing I was going to say. Oh, I lost my train of thought. Okay. Good night. Sorry about that. Good night.